Hello, friends, and welcome back to Reiki Women Podcasts. I am your co-host, Michaela Daystar of Heartscapes Reiki, and I am joined today for one of our snapshot interviews with Blair Graves of Flying Heart Healing. Blair is not only a Reiki practitioner, but also an end-of-life doula, and really holds those roles in beautiful balance with each other. Today, Blair and I wanted to have a bit of a conversation about the precepts, about how they are alive in her life, the relationship that she's developed with them over time. And just as we were chatting before jumping on this recording, there were some really fertile and juicy pieces about the precepts that were coming through. So I'm looking forward to having this conversation with you, Blair.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for doing this.
Absolutely.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah, so I'd love to just open this up and just invite you to share what's at the top of your heart as you consider your relationship with the precepts and how that's evolved over time.
Well, my background is in Western Reiki. I had my first Reiki training 22 years ago. And what we're learning these days in Reiki trainings is a lot of times very different than what we were learning when I started doing this. And so, there's not as heavy a focus on the precepts in, more Western style Reiki. And so just as I began to sort of lean more towards the Japanese perspective of Reiki, actually a lot through like conversations with you, right? And Nicholas Pearson's book and, other books that I've read, it's really leading me in that direction to really take this as a spiritual practice and with not as heavy focus on the healing modality aspect, not that it's not still a great modality, but just, to kind of reformat the way that I practice. So, I have to say, like, for me, the third one, whether you say just for today, I do my work diligently or do my work honestly, or I'm diligent, however, whatever your relationship is to it, to me, that's kind of the key to all of them. Because if you're doing the work, and that's what that one's about, right? It's about doing the work. To me anyway. And so, if you are doing the work, then all of the rest of them just kind of naturally fall into place. And when I unlocked that little piece in my brain, and obviously my experience is going to be different than everyone else's, but when I unlocked that key, so many things fell into place for me. So.
Yeah, I love that view that, as we were chatting earlier, that the precepts work together as like an interlocking puzzle, right? And that they build on each other, and that invitation to be diligent about what? About, the rest of the precepts, and diligently paying attention to how they integrate in our life, that's how we slowly do the work of Reiki, right? Which is to ultimately embody these precepts. Yeah.
Right. Well, and just like, to me, it's a lot about living with integrity in everything we do, in all of our actions. And that sort of brings in a self-care component that I think people might sometimes miss. I know I did for like a really long time. A lot of people, I think, hear the word self-care and they think of like bubble baths and really with, maybe with healing herbs or whatever, but they're thinking of bubble baths and, a piece of chocolate, and those things are wonderful. And they absolutely can be a very important part of self-care, but sometimes self-care is about doing really hard stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh man, that is such an important perspective. I've taught a class on self-care and radical self-care, and really in the align with what you just said, where self-care certainly wants to include, some of those sweet and, nurturing aspects, but it also means, what does it mean in this moment to care for myself? And oftentimes that means doing difficult things we don't want to do. Right. And the precepts, they really give us a model for that, right? Like it starts with the hard stuff: release attachment to anger and fear. right? Live your life that way, and then it's like, and like live in gratitude, right? The sweet medicine of gratitude and compassion, right? And so, yeah, I love aligning doing the work with the precepts with self-care, because just for today, what does it mean to care for myself? And by extension, if we're really doing that with integrity, as you said, caring for myself is caring for those around me, because we're connected, right? So if I'm truly in integrity and in alignment with caring for myself, by extension, care will be extended to others. And that really kind of challenges that notion that self-care is about selfishness or about separating ourselves from others or separating ourselves from life. It's really about integrating with life and about really paying attention just for today in this moment. What does it mean to care for myself? Yeah.
Right. Well, because, setting boundaries, is certainly a part of self-care. And if you think about it, it really does help the other party too. Like, it's not just for you, it's for them too. If it's someone that's important in your life, like, they don't want to overstep, right? They don't, theoretically, they don't want to violate your boundaries. So this helps them keep what, is hopefully a meaningful and important relationship to them. So, as we're caring for ourselves, it is a way to care for others as well. So
Absolutely.
I'm glad you said that.
You had mentioned something really interesting earlier also when we were chatting beforehand about this distinction between honoring the precepts, in particular, the first two, just for today, I anger not, just for today, I worry not. The distinction between that and something we might call spiritual bypassing, the turning away from natural human feelings and expressions of those feelings in favor of, only focusing on what we might call positive at all times is one way to think about that. And I'd love to just hear more of your thoughts about that. How do we honor the precepts without spiritually bypassing ourselves and other people?
Well, so, one way that I do that is so to me, the precepts are like living things. So a lot of times when I, do precept recitation, like, I actually, most of the time, except for first thing in the mornings, I don't say just for today.
Mm.
And I don't make it a statement. I might say something like, can I, in this moment, not anger about this or not worry about this? And it's not about not feeling that, right? It's about releasing that attachment so that I can look at it from a calmer perspective so that I can sit with it and work my way through it. And, whether it's like speaking up to someone who has said something that has really irritated me or, something along those lines, I can approach it from a place of compassion for myself and also compassion for them.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that kind of structure as a precepts contemplation practice, right? Asking that question, can I, right? And holding non-judgment about that and holding ourselves in compassion, right?
Yes.
Because sometimes the answer is no.
Yes. Sometimes the answer is no. And right? That's okay. That's okay. That's taking that moment to say, I am not like a perfect person. Well, okay, I might be perfect, but only in the way that we are all perfect expressions of source. But it's just a way of like saying, I'm not capable of not being angry right now. So I'm going to be angry.
Right. And then right, it's like the precepts don't just drop us right there. They don't say, okay, well, I guess you're not doing the work today. Right. Then we come to the end and we say, just for today, I'm compassionate for myself inside of that. Right? I'm angry. I can't let it go. And I can hold compassion for that part of myself that it just is where I'm at right now. Yeah. I mean, I love these kinds of explorations because on the one hand, this, list of statements are very simple, right?
Yeah.
Don't anger, don't be worried, be grateful, be diligent, be compassionate, right? And I know for me, that's part of, because an in-depth exploration of the precepts wasn't part of my early education in Reiki, the simplicity of those statements made it easy to dismiss them in a certain sense or kind of relegate them to the background, right? Like the point of this practice is hands-on healing. And then there's this nice list of things that would be, good to pay attention to sometimes. But when we really do the sort of contemplation that you just described, right, where we're really in an inquiry with ourselves about where are we in relationship to this list, we realize that they might be simple, but they're not easy, right? It's not easy to live our lives as an embodiment of these things. And we can sometimes misunderstand what they're inviting us into, right? And we can think about, do not anger, do not worry, meaning I have to strike those emotions from my experience, right? Which oftentimes is impossible. And so what we end up doing is kind of stuffing them and holding them tight inside of ourselves rather than letting them move through. So yeah, it's a complex system that is simple but not easy, and it really does require effort, right? Diligent engagement with the system to get us to the place we want to be.
Yeah, and just really going with the flow and knowing that your answers may be different the next day, they may be different a couple weeks from now, they may be different years from now. I mean, when I heard those when I was 20 years old, or 19, I was 19 when I had my first Reiki 1 training. I was like, how am I supposed to do that? Right. And of course, like there wasn't, and I loved my teacher. My teacher was great. She was teaching the way that she was taught. And, there wasn't any practical like, how do you apply these things in your practical life? It just, it was missing. So.
Right. Yeah. So good. So these are topics that, deserve a much deeper dive. And we may have the opportunity to take that deeper dive in subsequent conversations. I love what you brought to us today. I think there's a lot here for folks to consider. I invite people into the practice that Blair just shared with us, right? To be in inquiry, be in a question and answer dialogue with the precepts. Where am I today with respect to these invitations that the precepts offer us? And how does that flow into the rest of our day when we do that contemplation? Well, thank you so much for that.
Yeah. Sure. Well, it all goes back to that third one, doing the work, asking yourself these questions, checking in with yourself. That is doing the work. So
absolutely. So Blair, where can folks connect with you if they want to learn more about your practice?
Well, I am on Facebook and Instagram. I have a website that is under construction, but it's Flying Heart Healing. It should come up on a Google search. I'm pretty active on Facebook. I'm not as active on Instagram. I'm really not great at like the social media posting stuff. One of these days, maybe I will be, but right now I am not. And, but I'm pretty accessible. So, nice. Just holler.
Great. Well, we'll put some links to connect with you below. Congratulations on building a website. That is exciting. I look forward to seeing it in its completion and in its evolution. And thank you so much for joining me for this conversation.
Thanks for having me, Michaela.
Absolutely. And folks listening, thank you so much for joining us again. We love to hear your questions and comments and engagement. We really consider this podcast an ongoing conversation, not just with the folks who join us, but with you who are listening. The purpose of this show is to uplift the stories that each of us carry. Each of us have really valuable insights to share with each other. So please do feel free to comment below with questions, with responses, and we'd love to continue this conversation with you. And so until the next time we gather in this space, may you be provisioned for your journey, and I look forward to being with you again. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.